It is certainly appropriate for the Pope to support civil unions for same-sex couples.
And there is a difference between civil unions and a marriage between a man and a woman.
The American Religious Town Hall is now in session.
Welcome, friends, to the American Religious Town Hall meeting, where the discussion of religious, political, and social issues is meant to promote the cause of religious freedom and to help us better understand each other. And now, here's your host and moderator, Pastor Jerry Lutz.
Welcome. I'm James Weingardner, sitting in for Pastor Jerry Lutz, and we have another edition of the COVID edition of American Religious Town Hall. We have some great panelists to discuss an important topic, and so let's begin by having them introduce themselves. Michael?
I'm Bishop Michael Olson, and I am the Roman Catholic Bishop of the Diocese of Fort Worth, Texas.
I'm Rabbi Dan Levin. I serve as Senior Rabbi at Temple Bethel of Boca Raton, Florida.
My name is Canon John Peterson. I am an Episcopal priest, canonically resident in the Diocese of Washington, D.C.
Hi, I'm Carl Trovall. I'm Professor of Ethics and History at Concordia University in Austin, Texas, which is affiliated with the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod.
On October 20, 2020, a new documentary on Pope Francis entitled Francesco debuted in Rome. The purpose of this documentary, according to Vatican News, was to highlight the challenges of our time, the urgencies that need answering, and the mission of the Church in looking into those who suffer injustices. The film made global headlines because in the documentary, Pope Francis spoke in favor of civil unions for gay and lesbian couples. The Pope said, "They are children of God and have a right to a family. Nobody should be thrown out or be made miserable because of their sexuality." Then came the sentence that has caused so much controversy, quote, what we have to have is a civil union law. That way, gay couples, are legally protected, unquote. The controversy here is whether the Church supports such a union or should this be a state function only. One other observation, before he was elected Pope, Francis served as Archbishop of Buenos Aires. And as Archbishop, he advocated for same-sex civil unions in an attempt to legalize same-sex marriage. As Archbishop of Buenos Aires, he urged civil unions for gay and lesbian couples as a way to keep marriage distinctly heterosexual. I'd like our panelists today to respond to these three questions. One, how does your church or synagogue deal with same-sex unions? Two, have LGBTQ unions been a dividing issue in your faith tradition? And three, regardless of your personal opinion on this subject, would you agree with the statement that the Pope has taken a more welcoming approach to the LGBTQ community than earlier popes, and that Pope Francis has shifted the Church's tone, emphasizing its dignity of all people and his call to respect all people? Wonderful questions, fascinating questions. Let's begin with John.
Thank you so very much. And I'm very glad that Michael is sitting to my left so he can respond to all my heresies that I might say. At the outset, I think it is very important to compliment and to urge people to look at the documentary on Pope Francis called Francesco. It's a marvelous view, and I certainly urge people who are listening to us today to go and see it. I want to urge you to do that not only because of our discussions today, because one also learns so much about this incredible leader of the Roman Catholic Church today. And certainly I have nothing but the highest respect and regard for Pope Francis. In Francesco, the Pope is not speaking about gay marriage. Pope Francis has frequently affirmed the doctrinal teachings of the Roman Catholic Church that marriage can only be between a man and a woman in a lifetime partnership. And that is something that must be kept in mind throughout our whole discussion today, because this is such an important part of what Francis is trying to do within the Church. However, Pope Francis, and in the movie Francisco, this is mentioned, but this is not something new that he mentioned for the first time, because when, as the moderator's statement said, when he was the Archbishop of Buenos Aires, he himself at that time proposed to have same-sex unions. And he is making a very clear distinction here between a union and marriage. And that a union can be between two men or two women, but a marriage is blessed by the Church between a male and a female. And he's totally consistent here. And it is within this type of context that, of course, this has raised more controversy and more questions of exactly what Francis meant here. And he has not elaborated any further on this, from the reading I've done at least, in relationship to this issue than what is mentioned in the moderator's statement. So Francis, back in 2010, while he was still Archbishop of Buenos Aires, was talking about this subject, and he has continued to, in this film, also to make mention of this. So this is a very interesting distinction that he's making, and one that certainly causes us for pause and reflection in relationship to what the position he's taking, and therefore the Roman Catholic Church is taking. Now, one of the other questions is how does your church deal with same-sex unions? And in the Episcopal Church in the United States, which is a part of the Greater Anglican Communion, the United States, along with 9 other provinces within the Communion, have taken quite a different stand than what the Roman Catholic Church has taken. In the Episcopal Church, in 1976, they voted for same-sex marriage, and we have had since '82, I believe it is, same-sex marriages that are taking place within the Church, and therefore the same-sex marriage is being blessed by the Church. Now, this is not the position that other churches in the Anglican Communion take, but because of our polity, we are able to, because in the Roman Catholic Church, where the Pope is ultimately the total decider, per se, in relationship to polity, and good luck. In our political structure of our church, each province is responsible for the decisions and polity that's made. And as I said, 9 out of the 41 now will bless same-sex union marriage.
Thank you. Michael?
Well, where do I begin? I think I'll start with this, is that in my lifetime, just as a priest and as a bishop, I've been involved in the clerical and ecclesiastical life of the church under the leadership of John Paul II, and then Benedict XVI, and then Pope Francis. And my own personal observation on this is that we had a pope who was a philosopher, and that's how he really approached a lot of issues. And then we had a pope who was a theologian, and that's how he approached a lot of issues. And now we have a pope really who comes out of a tradition of spiritual direction, all right, which is very important for what's known as a gradual process, where, in the sense that we're always moving towards our final end or our ultimate end of union with God and neighbor. And so sometimes in the process of that, things are messy, all right? Now, the Pope is, he's known as the vicar of Christ. He's not the successor of Christ. And Peter, if he's the successor of Peter, his mission is really to confirm the brethren in the faith, All right, that means not only the members of the Apostolic College or the successors of the Apostolic College, but also the people of the faith. Now, what he was saying in the movie is whatever he's saying in the movie as cut together by the movie. The Pope is now free to change some things in the lived tradition of the Church. In a sense, he has to be faithful to the obedience of Scripture, of tradition as well, and the Pope's not attempting to do that. Now, with regard to the issue itself, in the last 100 years, there has been an increasing change in an understanding of marriage, as has been passed on for centuries, with regard to the three goods of marriage, which is fidelity, right, permanence until death do you part, and openness to God's gift of children. All right. Well, the first thing to go really on that was a sense of permanence. All right, as far as divorce and remarriage, and it was something that we could initially tolerate. And then there was, with the development of the birth control pill and contraceptive devices, openness to children as far as an essential quality of marriage being related to children. And now finally also there's the very nature of marriage itself, which is generally in a culture called into question. It's really not within the Church's purview, the Pope's purview, or of anyone else to change the basic teaching of the Church, which we believe is first of all seen in human nature, and then secondly, as well, has been handed on to us from Christ, who received it prior in the prior tradition of Judaism, as it was lived and passed on in the time he walked this earth. The idea of civil unions was a compromise to preserve the integrity of marriage as a man and a woman, in a sense recognizing that our culture and society has tied to marriage things like property rights, things like belonging, and also things like a sense of just security, all right? And so it was, in a sense, a compromise so as to maintain the integrity of married life. Even with civil unions, all right, it's a step, it's seen as not a replacement for marriage, nor even as an introduction to a church recognition of gay marriage. It is seen as something that is better than isolation and persecution of homosexual people. All right, now, but in itself, with sex comes not just rights but also responsibilities. All right, and if we could begin with that in common, we can work towards some sort of greater understanding of these issues, which require an understanding of the dignity of the human person. Finally, and I appreciate your patience with the time, I would just say that how has it affected our community? Well, in the same way that divorce and remarriage have affected our community, because it consists of families. Gay people are our brothers, our sisters, our nieces, and our nephews, and I think the Pope very much comes at this out of a Latin American tradition, and he's very fond of speaking this way, is that when the Church teaches as a mother, all right? And so we're not really happy about what you're doing, but sit down, you're here. And everybody, in that sense, has a sense of belonging. And then we discuss the doctrinal importance and evangelization. I think that's very important to understand. And I think that's something, the way Francis has administered his office has contributed very favorably to our life.
Thank you, Michael. Dan?
So in Jewish tradition, marriage is called in Hebrew kiddushin, which means holy things. And the reason why I think it's called holy things is that when two people say, there's other people out there, there's other good-looking people out there, there's other people out there I might be able to love, but you know what? I get one shot at this life and I choose you, and I want to establish that covenant of intimacy and all of the things, Bishop, that you were talking about. That's a holy thing. And what I think our tradition realizes as we've evolved is, what does kiddushin mean? What does it mean to formulate a household? So in Orthodox Jewish tradition, it's very, very clear. It needs to be between a man and a woman, and that's the definition. End of story. However, I think if you look harder at the sources, it teaches you something. In Hebrew, there are two words that the Torah uses, that the Bible uses to talk about intimacy. One is shachav, which means to lie down. When Potiphar's wife wants to get busy with Joseph, she says, shichvai me, let's go to bed. She's not looking for intimacy. She's looking for a nice afternoon. But in earlier, when it talks about real intimacy, it uses the word yada, to know. And so when you look at the book of Leviticus, which prohibits all kinds of sexual encounters, it only uses that word shachav. It only uses that word to lie down. And I would agree that if somebody engages in sexual conduct for the pure interest of having a nice afternoon, that in and of itself, I think, is profane. But what I believe in, very, very important, really at the core of my being, is that I believe in a God that is not gendered, which is different, obviously, than Christianity that has a God that was gendered, or an expression of God that was gendered. I don't pretend to speak for Christianity. But I also believe that love is not gendered. And what I believe is that when two people want to form a household, they want to be next of kin for each other, they want to create that sacred intimacy and commitment and covenant of trust and building a household together, that we ought to sanctify that, which is why there are those in Jewish tradition like me who will perform a Jewish wedding for people of the same gender, because it is when they are forming that household, that intimate connection, to me, the gender is not the material part of it.
Thank you. Carl?
Yeah. This has all been very interesting. Thank you for, it helps me understand different traditions and where people are coming from, their reasoning on this issue. To speak for Lutherans is to enter into quite a fray, because, the question, have LGBTQ unions been a dividing issue in your faith tradition? The answer is unresounded, yes, it has. And as a result, Lutherans have decided to essentially break away from one another and form their own church bodies, essentially to reflect their differing views that I think have been from both liberal to conservative views. You have the Missouri Synod, and I work at a Missouri Synod institution, and the Wisconsin Synod, Wisconsin Evangelical Lutheran Church, Missouri Synod, are both very conservative and would understand marriage to be only between a man and a woman, consider homosexual actions to be sinful and to be part of the fallen nature. ELCA, however, says that's too narrow of a look at Scripture, and that's the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. And they, like the Episcopal Church, have accepted gay marriage as being a legitimate way that two people can express themselves in a covenant of love, and that the standards for homosexual marriage is the same for heterosexual marriage, that there's no distinction there in terms of that kind of ethic. And then there was a group that broke away from the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America called the Lutheran Church of Missional Congregations, who, the Missouri Synod and the Wisconsin Synod opposed women's ordination. They were in favor of women's ordination, but they were against same-sex unions, and so they have formed their own congregation. And what's kind of tragic about all of this is that in our attempt to struggle to reinterpret and understand in light of modernity and the Scripture and the tradition, how do we interpret these things? I mean, Lutherans have chosen to, rather than fight it all out and have a winner or loser, they've just decided we need to agree to disagree and separate and be in our own communities until, and to let the Spirit move among us through the Word to come to conclusions.
1 minute.
Oh, well, I think, again, it's... to the rabbi's point, I think that the integrity of the human body and the body-soul composite is a mystery. All right, it's not really like a ghost in a machine, in the sense from a Catholic intellectual tradition. Rather, the soul is the form of the body, and they're meant to be together in human. And then also the designs of human nature are such, hormonally, spiritually, as well as in relational interaction, are engendered. And so the nature of marriage because of its close tie to the transmission of human life, and as forming a household, and a foundation of that, of the unique contributions of man and woman, are essential for life of marriage.
Thank you. Let's go to a break.
We hope you are enjoying today's program. If you would like to learn more about the American Religious Town Hall, please visit our website at americanreligious.org. That's americanreligious.org. There you can read about the mission and history of the program, learn about the Town Hall estates, and view past programs by clicking the appropriate menu buttons. Each week, Pastor Lutz looks forward to receiving your letters. You may write to him at the address shown on your screen. Send your letters to Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. That's Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. Thank you for writing, and thank you for watching. And now, back to you and today's closing statements.
Welcome back. We thank our sponsor, and we thank you for the opportunity sharing these programs with you. If you have some comments, suggestions, or desired program topics, please write. Please let us know. Let's begin now with our summations, and we'll go to Michael.
The issue of marriage, I think, is one that is always tied to sexuality and considered in light of that. I think in our contemporary world, our postmodern world, it's interesting to note that there seems to be fewer and fewer heterosexual people choosing to marry, and more homosexual people desiring to marry. And I think that calls for our reflection, especially among heterosexual people who are married. What is the significance of their marital union? What is their significance of their love for each other, as well as what is its ramifications for forming family life?
Thank you, Michael. John?
I want to actually thank Dan for his contribution, particularly with the word yada. For that, it seems to me to be such an important word here of knowing and the household. And so I really appreciate that. One of the problems that I think we have to face is that in the case of the Lutheran Church, in the case of the Anglican Church or the Episcopal Church in the United States, a part of the Anglican Communion, is that churches are in different places in relationship to this subject. And while there's wide diversity within the Anglican Communion on this subject, it's not monolithic at all. And for example, some of the countries that are part of now ordaining, or at least studying to not ordain, but for blessing same-sex marriages, etc., is Brazil, for example, next to Argentina, South India, Scotland, South Africa. And so we have a very wide diversity of countries for very different reasons that are looking at this subject. And so I think that we have to be appreciative of what Pope Francis has done to help us articulate this and to help being able to come to have an understanding that indeed the yada is extremely important to know and how we create our households.
Thank you, John. Carl?
Yeah, I would hope that our viewers in their congregations and different places that they are would take an opportunity to study and to do some reading. I was at a place at one point in which I thought I was absolutely sure I knew exactly what I believed on this issue and nothing was going to change it. And through reflective study, scripture, theology, talking to other people, you have to wrestle with stuff because there's some people who are heavily burdened out there. And I think it's important that we have open hearts and open minds as we struggle to address the issue in our congregations. And I appreciate what you had to say, John, about the fact that there are a variety of people who, even within different congregations and different churches within church bodies, who have differing opinions on this. It's not monolithic. And I wanted to also mention that you talked about these are our brothers, our sisters, our parents, our children, our cousins, that this is not an issue that's out there. This is somewhere in all of our families. And so it's something for all of us to treat very wisely and sensitively. I appreciate this discussion. It's been very good.
Thank you, Carl. Dan?
When a Jewish child is entered into the covenant as a boy on the 8th day or somewhere within that first month, and you celebrate their Hebrew name, the last part of that blessing prays that that child will enter into a life that's filled with Torah, chuppah, umasim tovim, which means Torah is instruction, moral instruction. Chuppah is the wedding canopy, and masim tovim are acts of goodness. And so the reason why that's how you sanctify a child is because that's how you sanctify existence. And the bedrock of community is family. And family is the bedrock of community because no community, no society can be sustained unless there are households. Households in which the members are safe and secure to be the best expression of their most authentic selves. And where you learn not only your duties to family, but you learn your duties to the larger community and the people that you live with, and your moral duties as a covenantal partner with the Holy One. And we need to work, is exactly that you said at the beginning of your summation, Michael. We need to work on building stronger households. And we need to care a little bit less about who forms those households and a lot more about that they form households. And to do everything we can in our communities in whatever way we can based on our theological suppositions and understandings to help people build the strongest possible, safest, most authentic households they can create, because that is going to be the building block that's going to create the strongest holy societies that we can fashion.
Thank you, Dan. You know, it's interesting that we sit here and there's clearly not anything approaching personal agreement on this subject as we go around our little table here. And yet, we all love each other. We are in a form of unity, even in disagreement. And it's a beautiful thing, and I wish that our nation and our world could learn that we can still be unified when we disagree. Thank you very, very much, gentlemen. Thank you very much. The charter of the American Religious Town Hall provides that Roman Catholics, Protestants, Jews, educators, and others may appear on this program and can declare their beliefs without hesitancy, and the rest of the members of the panel will uphold and guarantee that American right to all who will appear, irrespective of race or creed, so that the rest of the world can see that here in America, we believe in civil and religious freedom, not only in theory, but in reality. Now, friends, until next week, at the same time and over the very same channel, the American Religious Town Hall meeting stands adjourned. May the God of all of us bless all of you.